It's a great pleasure to have you over here on board. So stage is all yours, and over to Pritika for conducting the session.
Thank you so much, sir. Hi, ma'am. Are you there?
Yes, hi, I'm here.
So, ma'am, would you like to share some words about yourself with us?
Yes, thank you so much for such a flattering introduction and for that lovely video as well. I'm glad to be here to talking to all the students today. Just a very brief introduction about myself. I think my journey as a travel writer really began back in 2011. That's when I decided to quit my full-time job in Singapore and move back to India and try to, just experiment with other ways of life and other career paths, which were not really even careers back then. And I guess I just want to say that, there are so many careers already that don't exist right now, but they might in the next few years. And a lot of times there's also a generation gap whereby we might be aware of certain ways in which we can live and, earn our living, which might not seem prudent to everyone out there. But I think at the end of the day, we have to chase our passion because it's going to take us places that we never imagined.
Exactly. So true of your words. So, shall we start with our questionnaire?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, ma'am. So, my first question to you is like being from an economics background, like I read it somewhere that you're from economics background. So, how did this massive shift to the world of blogging happen?
Right. So I did do like a degree in economics, and I wouldn't say I was super passionate about it. I was okay about it, but I did a second degree in marketing as well. But what happened was I graduated in 2008, 2009, which was the middle of the financial recession around the world. Um, so at that time, all the companies that I had dreamt of working with, the big MNCs and everything, everyone had pretty much ceased their hiring. And at that time, it felt very, it felt very disappointing that, that I worked so hard towards this education, and now when it's time to, like get a job and kind of use all this knowledge in the real world, there is nothing out there. But I think somehow the dots only connect in retrospect. That's what Steve Jobs said. And I think that's what happened in my case because I ended up getting a job with the Singapore Tourism Board, which is not something I had expected or anticipated at all. But that job was my introduction to the whole world of digital marketing and social media. And that's where I actually started following the journeys of a lot of travel bloggers and travel writers. And I think when you see that world from outside, you definitely feel like, it's a world that you aspire to too. So I think that's what happened with me. And once I started following these bloggers, these writers, I felt like I don't want to be sitting behind a cubicle all my life. I want to be out there as well, experimenting with other things and seeing if I can be successful at it as well. So when I look back, I think the fact that I graduated in the middle of a recession actually helped pave this journey towards, travel blogging. Otherwise, I could have been doing something completely different.
To an extraordinary career, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And from being from a like typical Indian family, what was your family's reaction to all of it? Like, were they okay with it? Were they supportive enough?
I think you can imagine the reaction, right?
Exactly.
So when I first told my family that this is like I'm planning to quit my job, I've been doing this for a couple of years, and I just feel like this is not the future I want for myself. I think they were really shocked because especially growing up in conservative Indian societies and growing up in a small town, I think everyone just wants like a lot of stability and security. And I think that's fine, if you feel like that's the life for you. But for me, I felt like if there is any time to experiment, it is now. In fact, there's an incident that happened in my office, which I still recall, and which was the trigger for me to finally put in my resignation papers. And that was, so I'd been having all these thoughts about, like maybe taking a break from work, or taking a sabbatical, or trying something different. So I was talking to a colleague, and I just mentioned that, I've been working here for 2 years and I feel a bit burnt out. And he said, you know what, you've only been here for 2 years. I've been here for 12 years. You get used to it. And I think that really struck me, because I didn't want to spend my entire life just getting used to something. I wanted to wake up every morning and feel passionate about what I do, or at least most mornings. And that was my trigger to put in my resignation papers, and then decide that, I have a little bit of money to live off until I figure something else out. So I told my parents, that I've resigned only after I had actually resigned, so they couldn't talk me out of it. And then I moved back to India, and the idea was to work with an NGO initially. So I had found this fellowship online, and I'd done my research, and it felt quite promising. So I started. So I came back to India, and I started working with this NGO. But within the first 2 or 3 days, I knew that this is not going to work out. Like, this is not my space either. But I convinced my family so strongly that this is the opportunity for me, that I couldn't tell them that this hasn't worked out, because then they would really panic. So every day I would, I was living in Delhi at the time. So every day I would pretend to leave home and go to work. But actually I went to a cafe coffee day, and I would just start like filling out all kinds of freelance applications, pitching to different publications about ideas and things like that. And gradually, when things started working out, then I, decided to break into them. So I'm not trying to say that, we need to lie to our parents, or I'm not trying to propagate that. But I'm just saying that if you feel really strongly and passionately about something, you just have to fight for it against all odds, and also be responsible for, the decisions that you're making. If things hadn't worked out, I wouldn't be able to blame them at all, and I have to be okay with that.
And now that you have
that inspires me to leave my job.
And now that you've come so far, now are they convinced enough? Like, they know what you're doing and they're okay with it?
So it took a long time for them to understand what I do. Actually, it takes a long time for everyone to understand. And that's because, I think we're the first generation that's actually able to make a living just sitting behind their laptops or on their phones. And for a long time, my parents just thought that I was just, doing time pass on Facebook or something, because you can't imagine that someone's actually paying you to do something just sitting in your PJs at home. But gradually, different publications started writing about me, and I started writing for different publications. And sometimes my parents would get calls from, family friends, or, people they hadn't spoken to in a while, and they would tell them that they've been reading my blog. And then finally my book was released. So I think all this kind of led them to believe that I must be doing something right.
Good.
So yeah, it's been a journey, but I think they're way more supportive now than before.
That's really cool, actually, because most of our parents still they don't know what is blogging, what career is blogging.
Yeah, and we can't blame them, right? Because it's not something that even existed like even 10 years ago. So it's something very, very new.
So, ma'am, our student Neha has this question for you, that just like Eiffel Tower has fantasized her like from the childhood, is there any place that has fantasized you and which has topped your bucket list, and have you visited it yet or no?
So I think that list keeps growing like every single day. But while growing up, I was really curious and passionate about Spain. For some reason, I don't know what the trigger was, but I always imagined that someday I want to travel to Spain and spend a lot of time there. And so while I was in college, I started doing a course in Spanish, and I read a lot of books, watched a lot of movies. And finally, I did make it to Spain, a couple of years after I started blogging. But unfortunately, it wasn't, like the romantic Spain that I had imagined. Somehow I couldn't connect with, like the country like the way I had hoped. But many years later, I ended up going to Central America. So countries like Guatemala, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, which are also Spanish-speaking countries. And I felt a much deeper connection there. So I came to realize that, we have so many dreamy notions in our heads, but actually when we go to a place which we know nothing about, sometimes we end up connecting much more, and it becomes, like a different kind of fantasy in that sense.
Exactly. So being a solo female traveler, what all problems you have faced, or you think most female travelers face in our country or
Yeah.
anywhere else?
Yeah. So I think the advantage of growing up in India is that irrespective of whether we travel or not, we're always on our guard, right? So especially if we live in a bigger city like let's say Delhi, we're always taught to be wary of us, like be wary of our surroundings, be careful with our like our stuff. So in a way, it's a great training ground. And I always think that if you can survive in Delhi, you can probably survive anywhere in the world. But having said that, I think the biggest challenge for a solo female traveler or someone who wants to travel solo, whether as a female or a male, is the inner courage. Because, growing up, we're taught that there are so many things we can't do. And especially as women, we're always taught that, we always need a man to accompany us, whether it's our father, it's our brother, or it's our husband, or, whoever it is, but it has to be a man. And those are the people who typically make decisions for women. But I think once we find the inner courage and we convince ourselves that we are capable of taking our own decisions, I think that's half the battle won. And
And
that's the
brave
same.
enough to fight people actually who,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. And I think you have to fight your own inner demons first before you can fight someone else's perceptions or,
true that.
anything else that comes your way. So I just want to share a story about I mean, of course, like I've been traveling solo off and on for the last 10 years. But even so, every time I go to a new place or a new country, which is completely unknown to me, I still get like butterflies in my stomach and the solo travel jitters. I don't think they ever go away. But I think the universe is always sending you like small clues, like just ways to inspire you to keep going on your journey. And that's what happened with me a couple of years ago. So I was planning a trip to Central Asia. So I was looking at Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, one of these countries. And there's very little written about them, especially from a solo female traveler perspective. So I didn't know like what to expect in terms of safety and whether I should really go there alone or not. So I had put in my visa application, but I was still waiting for the results. And I was in Mumbai. So I was landing in Mumbai and then I was going to wait there for a few days to see if the visa comes through. But I was really nervous and I was wondering if I should really go through with this trip, or maybe this is not the right time, or maybe I should go with someone else. So anyway, while in Mumbai, I didn't have a place to stay, so I was looking on Airbnb, and I found this accommodation. It was this single woman who was hosting travelers in her house, and in her profile, she had written that she's really passionate about traveling, and she's traveled alone to so many countries and so many different parts of India. So I booked her place thinking that like this is someone that I could connect with, and maybe I can find the inspiration to do this trip that I'm so apprehensive about. So I decided to stay at her place. So I landed in Mumbai late at night, and I showed up at her door. And when she opened the door, I was really shocked because this woman, who has traveled solo on her own to so many countries around the world, she was on a wheelchair.
Oh God, really?
Yeah, her name is Parvinder Chawla. You can actually Google her. I did a story about her on my blog as well. But when I met her and we got talking, I think it struck me that if she has the courage to travel all by herself to these countries around the world and different parts of India, being on a wheelchair, then I really have no excuse to not have the courage to do it.
The
And I
stories
think the
actually give
universe,
goosebumps.
yeah, I mean, imagine being there in person. But I think the universe just keeps sending you clues, if you really just open your eyes and ears, and there are so many clues to like find courage and inspiration.
Exactly. So one of my colleague has few questions for you, and one of them is like you travel to offbeat places. So what all sources you keep in your mind, and what all points you keep in mind while planning a trip? Because I've noticed it in your blogs or be it your social media that you travel to places that are less explored, less crowded and all.
Yeah. So
So
when you're
what is
choosing, yeah.
hmm,
So when you're choosing offbeat places, in a way it's easier because I just look for places that not much is written about. So I don't have to do a lot of research actually to get there. But I spend a lot of time trying to read books which are written by locals of those countries. So not necessarily like a traveler who's gone to that country and written about it, but somebody
but a
who actually
local?
lives there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because that gives you a completely different picture of what life is like in that country. And I mean that's the same for India as well. Like people can come from outside and write about India, but the perspective that an Indian can share is probably really different. So I try to do that for wherever I go. I spend a bit of time, like reading blogs, looking at Instagram, but I typically try to find experiences which are not just off the beaten path, but which also support, local communities. So people who work directly with village communities, rural communities, in a way that they are also partners in tourism, not just, not just service
Exactly.
providers. I look at initiatives which are environmentally sustainable, which are environmentally conscious, because there's always so much to learn from different initiatives around the world. But typically, looking for such experiences also lead me to places which are quite offbeat, where not a lot of travelers go, where there's not a lot of mass tourism, and so everything kind of fits into each other. And then these turn out to be deeper experiences, because you end up spending a lot more time with the local people. You end up experiencing a place in a way that it's low impact, you have lower environmental footprint, and so you kind of experience a place deeper than if you just went to anywhere and just stayed anywhere.
So as like you live a life where you hardly in this network zone, but you still have such a big Instagram platform, and you just keep updated yourself with the blogs. You keep updating your audience with your blogs actually. So my friend Surya has a question for you, that do you have a team working, or is it just you?
So I'm the one who creates all the content, because ultimately all my content is personal to my travel experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and no one else can really convey that the way I can. So because it's personal to me. So anything that you read on my blog or on my Instagram, unless it's a guest post, it's all written by me. But I do have a couple of people who work with me part time, who do some of the back end stuff. So for example, I hate looking at analytics, so I have someone who helps me with that. Then things like SEO, a bit of Pinterest, and so on. So just like the back end things, I have a couple of people helping me out.
No
But
matter how
all the
boring
content
they
creation,
sound, but they're actually very important.
yeah, they are really important. And there are people who are super passionate about SEO, for example. Who are hardcore, like into like the technicalities of things, and it's just better for them to take the reign rather than me to kind of dabble into it.
That's cool. So, my colleague Pallavi has a question for you, that how to grab opportunities as a freelancer in the beginning, and how to work for the brands in the beginning. What kind of skills you have to actually develop in order to be a good writer?
Right. So I think when you start your writing journey, it's really important to ask yourself what it is that stands out about your writing. Because like let's say if you aspire to be a travel writer, what is different about the way you travel or the way you write about a place? Because there are like thousands or millions of people out there who've been to India, for example. What is it that you can offer differently that no one else can? And I
Yeah,
think just
definitely.
building on that style, style of travel, as well as that style of writing, that's what you need to do over time. And it's something that really happens with practice. I mean, if you go back to my blog and look at my posts in like 2011, 2012, and you look at the posts now, I can tell you myself that there's a huge difference, and I'm quite embarrassed when I read those posts. But I think it's important to just see the journey and the evolution. And I
That's
think the
what made
longer
you
you
you.
I think the longer you keep at it, the better your skill is going to get. And in terms of how to grab opportunities as freelancers, I'd say that when you're starting out, you have to assume that you're a nobody, right? Like when I started out, nobody knew that like my style of traveling is different, or it can be different, or my writing is a certain level, or it can be a certain level. But you have to build your own portfolio. You have to build your own confidence and self-esteem before you try to reach for the bigger guys. So everyone wants to be published in, let's say, Nat Geo Traveler or BBC, or one of the bigger publications. But you have to start with the small websites out there which might not even pay you, but it's a way for you to build your craft, to understand what is unique about your writing, and ultimately just build the confidence to pitch to the bigger people and learn how to do it.
Okay, so my colleague Abhishek has multiple questions for you actually. So I don't know exactly where to start from, but let it be. What difference have you witnessed in the industry and your content with the passage of time, when you started and where you are right now in the industry, basically? Because in content, you
Yeah.
have already mentioned it.
I think there's a big difference. Back when I started in 2011, and I'm specifically talking about travel blogging, travel writing. I'd say that like most of us who were travel bloggers back then, like it was a very small community, but it was all driven by passion, because no one ever imagined making a living from a blog or even from social media. right? So it was purely driven out of the passion of sharing stories from your travels, whatever your travel style or your writing style might be. And I feel like now, because the industry has changed so much, like there's so much more focus on monetization and how to, build your reach, how to build your audience, how to really make money out of the content you're putting out there. I think there's so much pressure that maybe that passion has somewhere gotten lost. So when people ask me, is this a good time to start a travel blog? I always tell them, ask yourself, would you start a travel blog if you knew that nobody is going to read it and and you're not going to make any money from it? And if your answer is still yes, then that means that you're truly passionate about sharing stories from the road. And if you are truly passionate, then you're going to sustain that, that initial period when nobody's reading you and you're not making any money. And if you can sustain that, then you've already won half the battle.
Exactly. I think making money out of it cannot be a passion that can serve you like for a long time.
Exactly. And there are way easier ways to make money than, starting a travel blog, to be honest.
So my friend has this question that just massive reach on social media is enough, or engagement with your audience is the must?
I think definitely engagement is a must, because these days you can pay like a few ₹100 on Facebook or on Instagram and buy followers, right? And everyone can do that. But I think what really sets you apart is, one, the quality of your content, and two, how people engage with you. And I mean, even engagement varies in different ways. Like you'll see accounts on Instagram, for example, with millions of followers, and maybe they get like, hundreds of comments. But if you look at the comments themselves, most of them will be nice click, nice picture, this looks good, like a smiley face or something like that. But I think the real accounts which have huge engagement and an actual relationship with their audience, you'll notice the difference in comments where, people actually talk to you as a real person rather than just, someone that they're scrolling past. So I think engagement any day over reach.
Exactly. So what, according to you, is the importance of self-branding in terms of travel blogging and travel career?
So I think self-branding is probably the only thing that makes you stand out. I mean, if you look at Google or if you look at Instagram and you search for anything, right, you'll find thousands of accounts on Instagram and you'll find thousands of articles on Google. The only thing that sets you apart is your self-brand. What is so unique about your content, and that shines through every piece of content you put out there, right? So self-branding is extremely important in the sense that it defines who you are and your content is, and it sets you apart from everyone else out there.
And what are some of those common tips one can keep in mind, like when he's on his way to develop himself as a brand?
I think content is again the most important. Oftentimes there's this thought that I have to put something out on Instagram today, or I have to write a blog post today, right? But I think quality is way more important. So every piece of content that you have out there is actually your branding. Like I could stumble upon something that that you created maybe 2 months ago, and I could stumble upon something that you created today, and I think the brand should shine through in both pieces of content. So I think ultimately your content is your brand. And ultimately, if you're consistent, if you're credible, if you have the same level or increasing level of quality, then that's you self-branding yourself.
So following a post pattern is not as much important as the quality of the brand, quality of the content. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So my friend Manas has this question that being a travel blogger and content creator, the quality of the video matters the most. On the other hand, making money through it is also necessary. So mixing them both is tough. How do you do that? And how should one do that?
So I think it's really important that no matter what money you're able to earn, you don't sacrifice your credibility ever, because your brand partnerships will come and go, but your readers are the ones that will stay. And I think if your readers can tell that you've just sold your soul to like market anything and everything that comes your way, right from a piece of soap to, I don't know, like a car, if you're marketing everything out there, then you have lost your credibility, right? Whereas if you're really specific about the products or the experiences that align with your brand, then again it comes back to self-branding, right? Because if you're marketing something, or if you're promoting something, or you're partnering with a brand that aligns with your values and your self-brand, then your readers are much more likely to actually listen to you, as opposed to if you're just like for the money, if you're just like marketing anything and everything out there. So I think it's a very fine balance, and sometimes it's often not easy to have that balance, because you do put in a lot of effort and you do want the money, But at the end of the day, your credibility, if that's lost, then
It's
I think
everything.
exactly it's not going to come back, and your audience is not going to believe you again.
So if you have to suggest to the newly made self bloggers, like they should opt blogging as a full time career or a part time or freelance career, what would you suggest?
That's a difficult one because obviously things are very different now than when I started.
Exactly.
There's a lot more competition now. A lot more people want to become not just have their blog but also monetize their blogs, and so there's a lot more. It's much harder to stand out in the space. So what I would say is, first just start out. If you're really passionate about it, then start it as a part-time thing. Chances are that in the first 1 year or 2 years it will be difficult to make money off it, but try everything you can. And I think while you're still studying, or while you still have a full-time job, it's a good idea to do this on the side and see whether you actually feel passionate about it, and
Yeah.
whether you actually want to continue it, and how things are working out for you.
You can experiment on it basically.
Exactly.
So one of your recent blogs was about future of travel blogging when no one is traveling, right?
Hmm.
So what is actually like what problems are you facing during this corona time?
Yeah, I think this is a really strange time for everyone. I think even as students, like studying tourism and travel, it's a very strange world because you can't imagine traveling in the foreseeable future, and it's not even going to be fun because if everyone is so suspicious of each other carrying the virus, for example,
Exactly.
then the whole essence of travel is to interact with people and build new relationships and everything, which is kind of on the sideburn right now. Um, so it's really hard to predict what the future is going to be, but the way I see it is that at some point we will emerge out of this, whether that's with a vaccine or whether it's just we learn to live with it in some ways. And when that happens, like traveling will slowly become normalized again, or like the new normal of travel. And I think at that point, again, like travel bloggers who survive this kind of lull, they will have like brand partnerships again. They will be able to travel again, and probably traveling will look completely different. I think there'll be a lot more focus on slow travel, because you don't just want to go to a place for 2-3 days and go through all the quarantine protocol or whatever, like testing and things like that. So it'll be slow, longer duration travel. I think a lot of people will be taking their work from home to travel. So for example, this whole idea of being a digital nomad where you can work from anywhere in the world, a lot of offices are doing that now. So I think soon it'll turn into something that you travel with as well. And I think there'll be a lot more focus on responsible travel also, because you've seen that, like we've all seen that all the environmental damage we've caused over the years or over the decades, it's all coming back to bite us now.
Exactly.
And so we want to be a lot more conscious about how we travel, what our carbon footprint is, what our impact on our places. And so there's going to be a lot more focus on traveling more sustainably and with the environment in mind.
And reading, like, I've read many interviews of yours and you have mentioned it that slow travel is your way.
Yeah, and I think it's a much more enjoyable way, because otherwise you're just you're ticking off things on your bucket list and you're taking photos, but are you really building a relationship with a place or its people? And I think that only happens when you slow down and you just let go of those lists and just like take things as they come.
Yeah, true that. So coming to responsible tourism, being a preacher of responsible and sustainable tourism, what all points you think one has to follow in order to neither harm the environment nor affect the tourism?
Okay, so I think it really starts from the time you start packing your bags. First of all, it's a great idea to travel light, because it enables you to get by much quicker. It's easier to use public transport and so on. But also the fact that, are you carrying a lot of single-use plastic, for example, to a rural area which has no waste management in place, and so those hillsides are just going to be littered with that plastic. So I think it starts right from the time you start packing your bags, how you decide to get to a destination. Are you hiring a private vehicle? Are you flying? Or are you using public transport? Public transport like train and buses are obviously more environmentally efficient. Then where you choose to stay makes a huge difference. Are you just staying in like a regular hotel or guest house, or are you actually staying like in a homestay where the money you spend actually goes back to a local person? And at the same time, you have, you connect with the local person on a much deeper level, as opposed to staying in a hotel where you're just in your room and you're kind of in a bubble away from how people live there. And then everything you do in a destination. So are you, for example, are you going to a zoo, or are you supporting animal activities that are actually cruel to animals? The kind of food that you're choosing to eat, are you choosing things that are locally grown and part of the local cuisine, or are you just eating what you eat at home? Because then you might as well just stay at home, right? So I think every little thing that you do along the way, it counts. And I think when you choose to do things more responsibly with the environment in mind and with the local people in mind, you also end up having much more unique experiences, because you end up trying like the local food, you end up going to places that locals visit, and so on. And so you're not really like a tourist in that sense. You're almost kind of like
A
living there.
local.
Exactly, at least for a short while.
Yeah. So my next question to you is like, you have a clothing line. I've read it.
Mm-hmm.
So how is the Shooting Star collection, your sustainable clothing line, one way of promoting responsible and sustainable tourism?
So I think it's less about tourism, and the idea is more about like self-expression. So we have, we just have a few designs right now, which are like hoodies and T-shirts and stuff. So there's one slogan which says "Una Vida," which is actually an encounter that I had in the Dominican Republic when I was traveling there, and I was having this conversation with a local inside a cave in a waterfall. It was this bizarre landscape. And we were just talking about, different people and how life is like in the Dominican Republic and how life is like in India. And then finally, and I mean, I guess we were kind of being a little bit judgmental about the people we were discussing. And then finally, there was this silence. And then this guy, he said, but you know what? Una vida, which is the Spanish phrase for one life. We only have one life. It's best to live it like we want to, and let other people live like they want to, and we shouldn't judge anyone. And I think that really became a motto for me, on my travels. And every time I need to make a decision, I think Una Vida, I just have one life. So one of the slogans on the t-shirt is Una Vida, just a reminder that we have one life. It's kind of like YOLO, but in Spanish.
I guess it's gonna be our motto now.
Yeah, it's a good
We're gonna
motto to
greet
live
each
with.
other with Una Vida.
So the Shooting Star collection, first of all, it's all environmentally friendly. So right from the material that it's made with, the inks that it's printed with, the way it's transported, there's no plastic used at all. And then the collection raises funds to grow forests in Uttarakhand. So there's an organization that we contribute funds to, and they use this method called the Miyawaki technique, which is it's a Japanese biologist who came up with this technique of growing real forests, which are native to a place, but which grow significantly faster because he's understood the relationship between trees and shrubs and so on. And so using those techniques, you can grow native forests. So the whole idea is to, encourage people to wear their self-expression, but at the same time, they're also supporting forests in Uttarakhand.
So my friend Himanshu has this question that while promoting, like, what were the challenges you faced while promoting your book or being a very new as an author? How do you manage all the marketing part?
I think it was quite a huge challenge because the book industry works in a, like, to me it seems like a crazy way, which is that pretty much every month, every publisher in the country releases at least 7 to 8 books, and they have very small marketing budgets. So a lot of great books, they just get lost in the pile, because there isn't sufficient marketing and people are not really sure how to market it themselves. I think if I was a publisher, I would release maybe just one book a month and really make sure that it reaches like a huge audience. But anyway, like
It became a national bookseller.
there's a reason why the book industry is in the shambles. But I think with my book, what really helped was the fact that I already had a readership on my blog. And so that was already a ready base of people who were, who could be my audience. So I just used my channels like Instagram and my blog and Twitter and Facebook to kind of promote the book. And then I think gradually what happened is like word of mouth caught on, because if one person reads it and they like it, they recommend it maybe to 1, 2 other people, or they post in a Facebook group, or they leave a review on Amazon, and all that really helps. So it was like a slow, organic process. But I think what really worked for my book was the fact that I already had a readership.
So as many travel and tour companies are coming into business and providing like biking and trekking trips to some off-guard places, which somehow exploit the beauty and nature of the place. So how far do you agree with this point of view?
I think it's very tricky because, as travelers, we all want to go to such places and we want some basic comforts when we go there. And yet we don't want, like too many people coming to these places or spoiling their beauty. So it's a very fine line, I would say. But I think what's really important is that whether this, like each and every company should have a responsibility. And as travelers, we should hold them to that responsibility. So, for example, like let's say there's a company that's going to Ladakh, that's taking a trek to Ladakh. Are they hiring mostly local guides? Are they hiring mostly local porters? Are they hiring local drivers? Are we staying in local homestays? Is much of the money that we are spending out of our pocket to this company, is a lot of it going back into the local community? Because at least that's one way that tourism can benefit the people who live there, right? Secondly, is this company responsible enough to not create any trash, especially in a place like Ladakh where there's no waste management and the nearest place for waste management is thousands of kilometers away. So are they giving plastic bottles for water, or are they giving, like, let's say, refillable water bottles, or are they asking people to carry their own bottles and you can fill real Himalayan glacial water, on the trek? In terms of the food that they are providing, are they giving a taste of the local food, or are they carrying all these plastic things from like, let's say, the nearest city, and just cooking that food that you can eat anywhere else in India? So I think all these things really make a difference in terms of whether you should travel with that company. And ultimately, if travelers demand it, then companies will make sure that they are responsible, because otherwise no one will travel with them. So I think in that sense, we have a huge responsibility in terms of how these places are preserved or exploited.
And in these times, like, you have to showcase yourself as a brand who cares about the nature and environment more than just organizing trips.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
they are like, do you think they should take account of organizing some sort of cleanup drives and campaigns in order to clean such places?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the very basic thing that they should do. But it like two things are really important. The first is, are they themselves creating a lot of trash? Because then it kind of beats the purpose of creating a cleanup drive. Because if you yourself are contributing to the trash, so like I said, are they giving plastic water bottles? Are they carrying like plastic cutlery, things like that? They shouldn't be the ones creating that trash. Secondly, if they do a cleanup drive, what happens to that trash? Like, are they just gathering that trash and putting it in a dustbin, which will ultimately land up in a landfill? Or are they actually carrying that trash back to a waste management facility where it will actually be treated? So, I mean, I know that there are a lot of companies doing great work, but there are also those who just do it as a branding exercise or as a PR exercise. And I think we have to be aware as travelers that we need to call them out, when it's just a marketing gimmick rather than something that they actually mean to do.
So how do you think, being a vegan and true digital nomad, you have contributed towards sustainability and responsible tourism?
I turned vegan about almost 5 years ago now. And for people here who are not familiar with what veganism is, it's basically, it's kind of like a lifestyle where you choose to cause the least amount of animal suffering. So right from the food that you eat, the clothes that you wear, the cosmetics that you use, things like meat, seafood, milk products, so cheese, butter, ghee, eggs, honey, anything that comes from an animal. Like when you start researching, you actually realize, like the extent of animal suffering it causes. And I think for me that was the trigger to. So I was raised in a like a typical Punjabi family. We used to eat everything, and then when I realized, I think I was in the 9th grade when I realized that I'm actually eating the flesh of an animal that I don't need to eat. So I turned vegetarian back then. But it was much later in life that I realized that milk products are also the source of immense animal suffering. I mean, cows are just like humans, right? They produce milk for their babies. But if humans want to get that milk, then the babies have to be kept away from the milk. The male calves most of them are either abandoned or they are killed or they are castrated. And pretty much they are slaves their entire lives, right? Cows to give milk. And so if you read about the dairy industry, and not just like the large scale dairy farms, but also small scale dairy farms, it's pretty heartbreaking what happens. And then also products like leather, which is essentially like the flesh of a horse or a cow. There's silk where, to make one single silk sari, 10,000 silkworms, which are beautiful creatures. They are either burnt alive or they are smoked alive. And do you really need to wear, like dead worms? I don't think so. So I think all these triggers, I mean, just learning about everything that happens out there and actually going to some of these places and experiencing it in person, it convinced me that, even though it sounds difficult, I'm going to try to be vegan. And even wherever I travel, I'll be vegan, and then I'll see how it goes. And actually, I've ended up, building so many more friendships and discovering so much more about food by virtue of being vegan. And environmentally speaking, I mean, being vegan not just contributes to less animal suffering, but it's also environmentally much better, because right now, almost, I think about, I don't remember the exact statistic, but about 60 to 70% of all agricultural land around the world is used to grow food to feed animals. And then those animals are fed to humans, or their milk is fed to humans. But if everyone started eating just plant-based food, so like instead of eating plants indirectly through animals, we just directly eat plants, we can actually free up a lot of that land, almost I think the size of Europe and the US combined or something like that, and we can actually release that land to grow forests and still feed the entire population of the world. So environmentally as well, like the numbers are just it's a bit crazy, like if you look at the scientific analysis and everything. So I think by virtue of being vegan, maybe one person's being vegan doesn't change like all that much, but I think when one person is vegan, they inspire, or they can
Exactly.
like
And when
create
yourself,
awareness.
you yourself as a brand, you actually motivate people so you can do this.
Exactly.
And usually we don't think of it, like we usually don't consider a silkworm, like how badly he would have been hurt for making a silk sari out of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think when we start thinking of, like animals as sentient beings as well, it changes everything, because they feel, like for example, many of us have pets like dogs and cats, but I think like cows and worms and elephants and every other animal feels the same amount of love and pain, and they go through the same suffering as well. And if we can play a role in minimizing that suffering, I think that's our life is worth it in a way.
That's really inspiring. So my friend this Palvi has a question for you, that living this journey so far, what do you think has contributed the most, your destiny or self-belief?
My latest Instagram post, this is a question I asked, like, do
I
we
saw
choose
that.
our own destiny, or does our destiny choose us? And to be honest, I don't have an answer. I think it's probably a mix of both. Someone shared a really good quote from Rumi, and he said that we are all playing a certain tune, and all of us have different instruments. We can't change the instrument, but we can change the way we play the tune. So like our circumstances are different, and probably where we are right now in life is different, but the decisions we make from here on are our self-belief, right? They're not necessarily our destiny.
Destiny,
And
yeah.
I think if we make those decisions, we can change the course of our destiny, at least to some extent.
So to conclude, I'd like to ask you that what advice would you like to give to all those aspiring students who see you as their role model, including me, and aspire to live a life like you?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm a role model or anything, but I think it's really really important, like I said in the beginning, to believe in your passion, to build your skills, and to not give up on it no matter what people tell you. Especially growing up in India and living in India, like there are all these set rules that by the time you're 20 you should be in, or whatever you're 18 you should be in college, then you should finish college, maybe do an MBA or a master's, then get a steady job and rise in that job, and then probably get married, have kids, and this is your life, right? But if you feel like that's not the life path that you want to follow, then go out there, make your own decisions, earn your own money, and prove to other people that you can live differently, right? And ultimately I think you just have to remember that you have one life. Una vida.
Navida. So there are some questions in the chat. Can you share your experience, like how and why you decided to become a solo traveler? By Best Lippy.
Okay. So I don't think it was like a very conscious decision. It so happened that this was back when I was working in Singapore, and I was thinking of, maybe quitting or maybe trying something different. And as part of my work, I was following, like I was in digital marketing, so I was following a lot of Facebook pages and Twitter accounts and so on. And I happened to enter a contest. and I won tickets to 2 flight tickets to Europe. And I just felt like, this is it. This is the universe telling me that I have to try something different and I have to do something different. So I convinced my bosses to give me 2 months of unpaid leave from work. And I spent the first month traveling in Europe with a friend. And for the second month, I'd been researching online. Exactly. So I found Spiti, and the moment I read about this organization, Spiti Ecosphere, and I read about Spiti as the region, I just felt like it was calling out to me, and I had to go there. And I just felt like I had to do this alone. I didn't think it was a big deal to travel alone until I broke the news to my parents. But I just felt like it was something I had to do. Like there was just this calling from within to just go there and figure it out. But I think even if we think about it more consciously, we can convince ourselves to try it out. I think we have to stop letting people tell us that you can't do this or you can't go there or it's not safe for you. I think you have to be responsible for your own actions. And of course, like you have to stay safe and, like take all the basic precautions and then just believe that, you will meet good people and good things will happen to you.
Thank you, Shivya, for answering all to our questions. I hope we have not. I hope you loved it.
Yeah, it was, those were really thought-provoking questions, actually. So thank you for all the questions and for having me for this webinar.
I'll definitely like to hand over this to my mentor so that they can give you a better.
Sure. Thanks, Ritika.
Pawan sir, please will you take it?
Thank you very much, Shivya. And you are an inspiration for all the youngsters. So, your 3 advice to them to be a good travel professional, or if they even want to become a blogger. So, 3 advice they should keep in their mind because they all are attracted towards your profession. So, what should be their motto if they want to be part of this industry? 3 important takeaways from you.
Okay. So, Dr. Niti, I would say that the first is definitely to feel the passion for it, because like I mentioned earlier, this is not like a conventional career. This is not something where you can go into a job and tune out at 5 p.m. in the evening and then get your salary. This is something that you have to persevere and work on. And if you don't feel passionate about it, then it'll be very hard to continue. So I think the number one point is passion. In terms of my advice, I think the second advice is, let me see what comes first. So I think the second thing is really to build your portfolio, because there are so many aspiring bloggers and travel writers out there. How are you going to stand out, right? And I think the more you work in this field, whether you're still studying or you're working, you work on it part-time, and then you figure it out from there. But basically to build a very strong portfolio, because that's what's going to set you apart. Your content is going to set you apart and your experience is going to set you apart. And I think that will also make you realize how passionately you feel about this, so that you want to make it work in the long run. And I think the third is definitely that I think we're emerging into a world where it's very clear that like the environment is really important. Like we know that climate change is real. We know that this pandemic has happened because of our environmental destruction. And so as you chart this journey towards becoming a travel blogger or a writer or some sort of influencer, always remember that you have to think of the environment as well. And if you have the power to create awareness, to educate more people about things that they can do to have a lower impact, then it's really important to use your voice to do that. It's great to make money, it's great to travel, but at the end of the day, if you can use your voice for a good cause, then you absolutely must do that.
Thank you very much. Also, I have a personal observation. I just want to have your words on that.
Sure.
From a student of tourism industry now, as an academician, I have seen that earlier the skills were required from a student was more about knowing the geography of the place and about airlines ticketing. But now the skill set is evolving. So you have to be a good writer. Even if you don't want to go in travel writing, you have to be a good writer. You have to be very good with technology. So why this shift has emerged, if you can comment, and how the newcomers will cope up with this? Because everyone cannot be good in writing. But I think this is a very required skill by all the companies these days. So what are your advice for such students?
Yeah, so I think the shift has probably happened because there's been such a massive shift towards digital. Like there was a time where all travel decisions were mostly made offline, but now most of the decisions are made online. You know, like right from Instagram to blogs to Google search. And a lot of people are, you know, they're not really relying on travel agents anymore. For example, they do their own research, they make their own bookings, and they are more independent travelers. And I think that's where this shift has happened. It has also like democratized the whole travel space. You know, right from you don't even have to be like a licensed hotel to host travelers. You can be an Airbnb, and you know you can just have your house and have one room on rent, and you know actually make a living through that. So I think this whole shift towards digital, it means that we need different skills now. Uh, so, uh, so so I lost my train of thought. So yeah, I think my advice for that is that I think like our generation has mostly grown up on the internet. So, but a lot of us, you know, we do use Facebook, we use Instagram, we use Twitter, we read things on Google, but we're not really looking at it from a professional perspective. You know, a lot of us just, you know, we are stalking people that we like or we have a crush on or something. We are coming up with like these dreams and these aspirations of things we want to do, but actually we can use these platforms in a much more professional way. So for example, with Facebook, you should definitely join groups on travel blogging and travel writing, especially for beginners, because there are lots of amazing tips out there. A lot of people are sharing their experiences, and you also feel like you're part of a community. And it's the same with Twitter, same with Instagram. So just finding the right kind of people to follow, building the right kind of communities, I think that's what will propel you forward to move in this direction.
Thank you very much for all your advice. Really, it was a very interesting session, and the comment goes, the whole content from you was straight from your heart, and we appreciate it. And I hope all my students, as well as we have others who have joined us that are not part of IITTM community, but still they have joined because they wanted to hear you. So thanks from my side. I request Dr. Pavan Gupta sir to extend formal note of thanks, please.
Thank you, Dr. T.
Thank you, Shiva. It has been a wonderful 1 hour session. We've learned a lot. I think the students have benefited a lot by learning about the journey, the professional way you got into the things. So once again, on behalf of IITTM and all my staff, colleagues, students, I thank you again.